Hello everyone, my name is Evgeny Gorokov. I'm here presenting a Hurricane Katrina case study. In this video, we'll be covering introduction, destruction, relevant information, case study selection, lesson learned, critique of the case study, conclusion, and references. Hurricane Katrina was formed as a tropical depression in the North Atlantic Ocean around the Bahamas. The system developed on August 23, 2005 and became a Category 1 hurricane in 2 days. On August 25th, the hurricane impacted South Florida between two major cities, Fort Lauderdale and Miami. While ripping through lower Florida, the storm had wind speeds between 74 and 95 miles per hour. The sustained winds were recorded at 70 miles per hour and the rainfall of 5 inches in some areas. The violent storm caused structural damage and power outages for 1 million customers. The passing of the storm over South Florida was 8 hours, which was more than enough to sustain considerable damage that were estimated to be $65 million. After rambling South Florida, Katrina entered warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico. In the next 2 days, the perfect warm conditions in the Gulf made the hurricane into a Category 3 system. The preparations for the storm were in full activations among 4 states on local, state, and federal governments. The Katrina was only 2 days before striking the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. The storm continued to develop and intensify into a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 170 miles per hour. The most vulnerable place for the most devastation was predicted to be in the city of New Orleans. The biggest reason was the city location, which on average was sitting 6 feet below the sea level. With early warning information circulating among many news channels, most of the town was in evacuation mode. People were leaving the city to the higher grounds. The authorities opened both highways directions to compensate for the increased flow of traffic for all evacuees. 90% of evacuees were able to leave the city in the appropriate time. On the morning of August 29th, Hurricane Katrina made landfall as a Category 4 system with winds of 120 miles per hour. The system traveled slowly through the land, causing an increased amount of damage. After the landfall, it took 12 hours of traveling time north through the middle of Mississippi State and lessened the intensity to the tropical storm with winds of 60 miles per hour. The damages continue on the path of tropical storm, but in less severe form. Unfortunately, the most damage and destruction was already made in New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina was estimated to be the most destructive natural disaster in U.S. history. It only took few hours for the hurricane to cross New Orleans, but it would take many years to rebuild the major devastation. It was estimated that the damage from the storm were up to $96 billion in 2006. However, the number will continue to grow as more federal reimbursement programs continue to sponsor the people in need. In fact, after 10 years of recovery, FEMA still had $2.5 billion set aside for unfinished projects. The total number of reconstruction, rebuilding, and federal reimbursement were estimated to be $160 billion. While rebuilding and reconstructing will eventually prevail, the loss of life and personal valuables will remain the most missed properties for all affected people. The total estimated number of people who died from the effects of Hurricane Katrina is around 1,800. More than 50% of fatalities were from the New Orleans area. As a matter of fact, on October 3, 2005, the rescue crew stopped searching for victims, with the total number of dead being 964, which quickly raised to 1,306 by November 6, 2005. The fatality numbers could be even higher because a good number of people were still missing. It was reported on February 17, 2006 that 2,096 people were still missing from Hurricane Katrina. The destruction led to significant imbalance in the Gulf, overflooding the city and forcing evacuations from many healthcare facilities. I researched the case study by utilizing the Case Studies and Disaster Response and Emergency Management book, the Federal Response to Hurricane Katrina Lesson Learned, another case study I found on the internet, and few news articles. The first reason that I chose to research this case was due to a meaningful period of time. The storm happened 1 month after I started my career with public safety. I also chose to research this case due to disaster management and preparedness improvement. This leads to understanding the shortcomings of the response to Hurricane Katrina and can provide valuable insights for improving disaster management strategies, including evacuation plans, resource allocation, and coordination between government agencies. The immediate response after Katrina by the local, state, and federal governments was ridiculed and criticized by many people. The response was not well organized, communicated, and delivered. Although most of the population evacuated based on the authorities' recommendations before the landfall, thousands of people remained in the city through the storm. After quickly rising water, people were forced to leave their homes and seek higher grounds for survival. The Louisiana Superdome was identified as a shelter for everyone in need before the storm. Many people came to Superdome before the hurricane made landfall, and many came after. Thousands of people were stranded on the rooftops of their homes. All attention was directed to search and rescue as many people as possible. Helicopters and boats were bringing survivors to the Superdome. No communications or aid were being distributed by FEMA or local government. The frustration grew fast with no electricity and quickly consumed supplies of food and water. Some conflicting reports were released by the news that people inside the dome were being mugged, raped, and even incidents of homicide were taking place. The news even reported that hundreds of people were dead because of the lack of law and order. Later, the reports were deemed not credible and far from the truth. The Superdome sustained roof damage during the hurricane, which later resulted in flooding. Many people were using the dome as a shelter. Trash was increasing as more people were arriving in the shelter. Bathrooms were backed up, and tension among survivors grew fast, and authorities had no future plans. The Superdome was becoming a prominent public bathroom that was never clean. In just a few days, the dome was deemed uninhabitable. The decision was made to evacuate people to a different area. It was estimated that the Superdome had more than 20,000 people waiting to be rescued. The biggest challenge that prevented a lot of effort was flooding. It was impossible to bring any buses or vehicles to evacuate that many people. Despite the challenge, the evacuation continued and all people were eventually relocated. The delayed response to Hurricane Katrina was a significant factor in exacerbating the impact of disaster. Several key aspects contributed to this delay. Federal, state, and local coordination issues. In the immediate aftermath of the hurricane, there was a lack of clear coordination between federal, state, and local agencies. This resulted in confusion regarding the allocation of responsibilities and resources. The federal government's response, led by the Federal Emergency Management Agency (FEMA), was criticized for being slow and disorganized. This delayed the deployment and critical resources and personnel. Assessment and prioritization delays. There were delays in conducting thorough assessments of the extent of the damage. Without accurate information, it was challenging to prioritize response effort effectively. The slow assessment process hindered the timely deployment of resources, including research and rescue teams, medical supplies, and relief aid. Logistical challenges. The destruction caused by Hurricane Katrina severely compromised transportation infrastructure, making it difficult to reach affected areas. Roads were flooded and airports were shut down, limiting the ability of response teams and supplies. Communication breakdowns. Communication breakdowns at various levels of government hindered the dissemination of critical and crucial information. This included challenges in coordinating response efforts and relaying accurate information to affected communities. Evacuation challenges. The evacuation efforts faced significant hurdles, especially for vulnerable population like the elderly, disabled, and those without transportation. The lack of well-coordinated evacuation plan contributed to delays in moving people to safety. The devastation created by Hurricane Katrina serves as a heartbreaking lesson in the importance of comprehensive disaster preparedness, response, recovery efforts, and rapid mobilization of resources in the face of natural disasters. It highlighted the need for clear protocols, streamlined communication, and well-trained response team to mitigate the impact of future disaster. Subsequent efforts in disaster management have sought to address these issues to ensure a more effective response in similar situations. Here's the list of my references that I utilize in my case studies. Thank you for watching.